podcast. The Idlecast.
In the great hall of the Justice League, there are assembled the world's greatest heroes, created from the cosmic legends of the universe.
Scott McDermott, Harrison Perkins,
And
Scott Clark.
their mission to fight injustice, to right that which is wrong, and to serve all mankind.
And now, Scott Clark.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Good morning, boys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Happier now.
Oh, good. Yeah, we were having a somber discussion before air. We won't share that with you. We don't want to. We don't want to harsh your mellow.
Yeah, bro.
Exactly. Say, before we dive into the stuff and where it's happening with you, I want to read a couple of things here.
Got some letters.
Thank you. I even print these out. First, I wanted to read a nice letter from a pastor who shall remain anonymous. And he says, Dr. Clark, I wanted to thank you and encourage you. I was a Baptist pastor for 7 years and considered myself reformed. I like the fact very much that he says considered. And he says, however, as a faithful listener of the Idlecast, I realized that I wasn't reformed or reformed light, LOL. Things changed for me after understanding covenant theology and the continuity of the covenant. It made biblical sense to me. I also read the Marrow, and it turned my world and my preaching right side up. So this is a very encouraging letter. I remember a lady approaching me and saying, your preaching is different. It's not that it wasn't good before, but it's richer. I had a meeting with my fellow elders and expressed my theological convictions, and I left the Baptist world, and now I'm in a Presbyterian church where Pastor Steve Molson, who is a graduate of Westminster Seminary, California. So this is a high level of my transition. Keep going, Dr. Clark. I love you, and I mean that. So that's fantastic. Not all of the communications that we get here at Idlecast Central are as encouraging as that one. So
Warms the cockles of your heart.
it does, yes.
I remember Steve. Good guy.
He is a good guy. And let's see, we have a...
Let's read some emails, shall we?
I think we shall. This actually is not an email. You know what this is?
Apple Podcast comments.
Yeah, that's what this is. This is from Martin Chamberlain, and he gives the podcast 5 stars. And he says, great podcast for better understanding the Reformed faith. It's level-headed and grounded. Highly recommended. So we even print out the podcast comments because that's how it comes out.
There they are.
Yeah, exactly. But it uses
Wow.
up. This is why all my toner is gone, because when I print these things out, you make a screenshot and it's all black. So now we're going to have to replace the toner cartridge because I've been getting the low toner warning for about a month. And after printing that thing, then I'm sure the toner is going to be all gone.
That's probably the epitaph that everybody has in mind for you, right? Level-headed and grounded.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's exactly what everyone
Universally
yeah.
endorsed.
Sabotucci's, Column 5s, spies! Oh, stop that double talk. I want to hear the Lone Ranger. Certainly. Is everybody dumb? I'm a victim of circumstance. Truth is stranger than fiction. He's talking pig Latin. I don't know what he's saying.
That seems appropriate. Okay, boys. After all that craziness, how are you? What's happening in your world?
I'm sitting in a chair right now,
Yes.
and I'm looking outside, and I think I've got both of you beat today for the coldest weather. That's what we do, right? We talk about the weather first.
Well,
When I
yeah.
woke up this morning, it was -2 degrees, and it felt like -15 because there's a nice breeze coming from the North Pole. So I win.
I imagine you do have us beat.
I win.
I got out my snowblower for the first time this weekend, and I don't exactly know how to parse snowblow.
You blew the snow. You moved the snow.
Yeah, I have snowblown.
Yeah, I don't know.
My driveway this weekend.
Yeah, how do you conjugate that verb? I really don't know.
The blowing of the snow.
There you go.
And how did it go?
That was kind of an exciting to get to play with a grown up toy, and do that. But at the same time, it was also very cold. And today I need to build a railing on some steps that I built outside. We have family coming who will likely need the railing to get up the steps. So that's less than ideal circumstances, but be glad to have it done.
You're a real man.
Learning to be. Striving towards.
I have questions. First of all, is your snowblower gas or electric?
I went with gas.
Okay, good. I just wanted to see, what kind of a man you really are. So, I mean,
It was a debate in my mind because the electric one would have been easier to store.
Yeah.
But even with 6 battery packs, they lasted for about 45 minutes. And I didn't know if I could do my whole driveway or my whole road, because we live on a very short road with just four houses that isn't public, and so it doesn't get publicly serviced. And I didn't know if I could do the whole road on a Sunday morning, if need be, to get out and get to church in 45 minutes. So we went with gas.
Yeah. I think the electric vehicles have taught us that you cannot trust batteries in the cold. You need more than that.
Follow-up question.
Go.
There is not a single person in your congregation that can plow that for you? Do they hate you?
I haven't asked.
My goodness, somebody should. Put it in the
I
announcements.
feel like I'm a burden to them already, honestly. And I'm not saying that they would endorse that. But I feel like a burden to most people I know. So I try not to exacerbate that.
Well, I'm asking your congregation right now, if your congregation is listening, please, somebody, plow Harrison out on the Lord's Day if you love
Rides
him.
were offered.
Only if you love him.
That's nice. I always shoveled my walk. I never had a snowblower. Always wanted a snowblower, but nenever had one.
Well, come visit.
Huh?
Come visit. I'll let you play with mine.
My late dad-in-law has a snowblower, I think, in the garage in Lincoln. So if I really feel the need to run the snowblower, I can go home and wait for snow and run the snowblower in my mother-in-law's house. So I never. I was the snowblower growing up.
Fun.
That was my dad's attitude.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm pretty sure my dad wanted children so that there would be somebody to mow the grass.
Well, why else would you have children? I mean, that's one of the major functions of children is to distribute the labor.
There you go.
So, yeah, I remember so this is a true story. I know this. I was, third grade. So how old are you in third grade? How old was I in third grade?
1950s.
No, I wasn't saying what
previous
what year
century.
it was.
40s.
Certainly previous century, yes. Let's see, you're 5 in kindergarten, 6 in first grade, 7 to 8 or something like that in third grade. I don't know.
Thereabouts.
We had just moved to a new house, and the backyard was about 75 yards long, and it was terraced. So the first 25 yards were flat, and that was not too hard. But the last 50 yards, it was like 50 yards by 25 yards, were sloped. And all we had for a lawnmower was one of those Scott's rotary lawnmowers. And the blades were not sharp. Dad wasn't particularly handy. Mom sent me out there. Mom was raised on the farm, and her attitude towards this sort of thing was, go mow the yard. And the mower was taller than I was.
You mean the manual ones, right? Where
Yes.
you push it,
yeah.
it turns it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no motor on that thing. We didn't have a power mower for years. And I remember starting around lunchtime, and I remember quitting when it got dark. So, because the grass, this is a true story. This really happened. The grass was up to my chest, waist, chest, with a dull rotary mower.
Oh, the good old days.
So, yeah.
When we lived in London, but to be fair, the quote unquote yard that we had
Yeah.
was about as much as 2 strips of grass. So it didn't take very long.
The only yard that we would think of in American terms that I ever saw in the UK was at Blenheim Palace, right? Winston Churchill's place, I guess. Otherwise, everybody had these. Well, okay, there were they call them gardens, what we call the backyard, pretty tiny, but almost nothing in the front. Everything is paved.
Oh yeah, that was the same. Ours was out back, and we had a little strip of grass.
Yeah.
Soccer pitch. That's where they have grass. The only place they have grass in London.
And large parks. I will say that. In where we lived, there was a park on the north end of town and a park on the south end of town, and they were both quite large. And there were places to play cricket as well, and some other. Actually, there was one in the middle of town too.
Cricket.
Yes, cricket. So I did. There were green spaces. Actually, there were more green spaces there than there are here where I am.
What is cricket? What is that, like proto-baseball? I don't understand cricket.
Yeah, it's complicated.
I watched it one time. It is complicated.
I'm not the guy to try to explain it to you, but it is. I've not played it. I've only watched it a little bit, but
I'm going to send what is cricket in as a Heidelcast question. And I'd like to see Harrison or Clark explain it, since you guys are both from London.
yeah, no. So what's new with you, Scott?
Not a thing. Just sitting here in my chair. What's new with you?
I'm still recovering. I'm doing right at this exact moment. I'm doing okay.
The Reformed Confession?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I need to go see the physical therapist, but I can't sit in the car right now. So it's kind of a crisis. I'm functioning. So we'll see how it, we'll see about going into class tomorrow. That's my big challenge. And then Thursday, I'm supposed to go see the physical therapist. So we'll see what happens.
Maybe someone from the church can lay hands and fix
I
you.
wish they would. I wish the Pentecostals could really do what they, I wish the marketing were true, that they can really do what they say they can do, that one of these spirit-empowered people could fix my sciatica. That'd be marvelous. And so
Maybe you could skateboard to the seminary.
That sounds safe.
that seems seriously ill-advised.
Mostly downhill.
There's a large hill right outside the house that I have to go up, and then there's some significant hills to go down, and then
Right at the driveway of the seminary, too. Yeah, uphill both ways. It's a great story. That's exactly the story that everybody wants to
kind of
tell.
is,
uphill
yeah.
both ways.
yeah.
And now you've got
Are
it.
you trying to kill Dr. Clark?
He is, yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, there have been a couple of times in the last few days where I thought that's maybe not such a bad idea. That just, or as a friend of mine said, who had the same affliction, he went to the doc and he said, "Look, if you can't fix this, then just cut off my leg. Let's get this done with." All right. The temperature in Escondido right now, as we're talking, 54 degrees. Street level temperature, 54 degrees. High today, 68. And mostly cloudy, although it'll clear off about 9 o'clock our time, and it'll be mostly sunny. So it'll feel warmer through the day. So there's your Escondido weather report. All right. Are you boys ready to answer some questions?
Give it a whirl.
Let's do it.
All right, let's rock and roll. Let me open up the coffer here. All right, there we go. Reach in there. And the first one is from Johnny, who says, "I have a question about the elements of the Lord's Supper. We seem to be having an issue in this country in particular with gluten intolerance. So it seems that these people are refraining from the body portion of the supper altogether, or bringing their own bread. My question has to do with the bread. Is it imperative to maintain wheat in the bread? It seems like there is some significance to wheat in the New Testament. If it's not important, where do we draw the line? Is it therefore okay to use potato chips, crackers, cookies, etc.? We mostly have wine with a few cups of grape juice. Does this matter too? Just trying to be wise and honor our Lord, but also want everyone who can participate be able to do so. Thank you, Johnny." All right. Well, that's raises a whole bunch of questions, and here's a related question that I've never answered to my own satisfaction, people ask me all the time, but I've never really cared enough to look into it. Maybe I should. And that is leavened or unleavened. Maybe we could tackle that one as part of this as well. Does it matter whether the bread is leavened or unleavened? All right, so what do you do with Johnny's question? How do you answer? Actually, there are multiple questions, but let's start with gluten. Do either of you guys use gluten-free bread in your administration of the Lord's Supper?
We do. Yes, we have gluten-free bread at our church, and it really wasn't much of an issue. We have some people at the church who struggled with, I think one has celiac and another couple have valid gluten-free issues that they need that. And so the elders made the decision, hey, let's get some gluten-free bread. There was already ocean spray and available for those who didn't want wine. So we figured a little gluten-free bread for the few people who have serious issues. I also, just as a side note, I try not to eat wheat.
Okay.
Because I can eat, maybe a pound of wheat and it will turn into like 4 pounds of fat overnight. So I try to stay away from wheat, but the Lord's table is the one place where I have no issue. So I don't know maybe if it's the amount or what it is, but I think the easy answer is, if the elders are okay with it, obviously it's their decision. Get some gluten-free bread, get some ocean spray in there.
That's interesting. Ocean spray. So that's cranberry juice.
Grape.
Okay.
That company makes all the stuff.
Okay, but not Welch's.
No, I thought that was a Seventh-day Advent company.
No.
No, is it not?
No.
Okay, well then maybe I'll tell the guys it's okay to get some Welch's.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
They made it because of prohibition.
Yeah. Or temperance, the whole temperance movement. Yeah, my recollection was that Welch's was Methodist, but I've never had any idea that they were Seventh-day Adventist. Oh, that's interesting. Harrison, what do you do?
So we do offer both. We have the plates, kind of the standard stackable, bread plates used for communion. And we have regular bread in the main part of it. And then there's like a little cup inside that has gluten-free. And so as we distribute, we give the option for both. In terms of the rationale, I have never, and this is not a defense, this is just a statement of fact. I have never seen the great need to be overly specific about the kind of bread. I understand that there is the metaphorical value of leaven in the New Testament and how that functions. I have not, in my reading of the passages about the Lord's Supper, seen that to be a major factor. The thing that does weigh for me is 1 Corinthians 16, the bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? So if it is bread, as we normally understand a type of bread, that we set apart through the sacramental actions.
And what about wine?
We do not presently have wine. We have grape juice. There was one event where we ran out of that, and it did end up being cranberry juice. And when I took the lid off, I was very surprised. And people even commented afterwards, we did not know what was happening with that cup by the look on your face.
That's interesting. So your congregation is oinos free.
Yes.
For the administration of the Lord's Supper. Oh, that's interesting. I've heard of that, but I've not ever encountered it myself. So that's interesting. Oh, well, I take that back. When I started out in the SBC, then that was wine, or that was grape juice. So that's true. But in the Reformed churches, I remember the first time I went to St. John's Reformed Church in Lincoln, Nebraska for communion, at least the first time I remember taking communion. And at that point, we were coming forward, I think. That's what I think I remember. And I remember taking the cup and drinking, and it was wine, and I wasn't ready for that. I was like, this is not grape juice.
Yeah. So being a Southerner, grape juice was very much the norm.
Oh, interesting.
For me until I went to California for seminary.
Really?
And that was the first time that I had seen wine actually used. We used wine when I was in London, did not use it when I was in Northern Ireland. Those were the practices when I arrived, as is wine free, as you've described it for our present practice. It has come up, as a discussion point when we had, not at my pushing, but certainly by my support. Shortly after I arrived at my present call, we did make a change to weekly observance of the Lord's Supper. And one of the factors going on there pastorally is that we realized that there was going to be some teaching that needed to go into that. And it would be a shift for a good number of people. And if that was difficult, and if wine might prove a difficulty, we did not want those challenges to be interlocked in anyone's mind. And so we thought we would do one thing and not tinker with more than need be for the time until that was settled. Not that there's any plan to bring the other up presently at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, one issue at the time, so that's probably wise. Do you know the history of your congregation's decision to administer communion using non-alcoholic substances?
Yeah. What year did you guys go from becoming Methodist to an OPC church?
Well, the church was planted in 1986. As best I know, I don't know that Michigan has had a long-standing taboo about these things, so I don't know.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
Because some of the OP congregations, that's why I wondered, because some of the older OP congregations have genuine fundamentalist roots, in the 1920s, and they could easily have been teetotaling congregations.
I do not think that is our background.
Interesting.
So I don't know.
So confessionally, it says bread and wine, right? I mean, that's what it says in our confession. How have congregations in the past justified not having wine?
I don't know. Is it materially different if you're not having wine? For example, I mean, here at the Escondido United Reformed Church, we have what I think is sort of a strange bread that we eat, and I think it's gluten free, which is I think why it's strange. I don't think there's any gluten bread in it at all. I don't know exactly when they did it, but don't you think there was sort of a national panic some years ago over gluten, and lots of people started abstaining from gluten who didn't have celiac disease? Obviously, if you have celiac disease, then you have a legitimate medical reason for abstaining from gluten. I mean, and it actually presents a significant threat to your health, your well-being. You could have allergic reaction or whatever. And I think something like that is also true for people with a history of alcoholism. Right. If you're just getting sober, I don't know how, maybe it's a little different if you've been sober for a while, but maybe it isn't. But I know, having grown up in a house that was mostly alcoholic, actually, as I think about it, right, 2/3 of our house had substance abuse issues. And I remember particularly when Mom got sober, that she could not have any alcohol whatsoever. In fact, it always worried me as a kid, because they had gone to San Francisco some years before, and they came back with 2 bottles of sake, and they never opened them. They just sat on the dresser as sort of decorations or whatever. And after she sobered up, I always wondered if she would, one night open up one of those bottles of sake, but she never did, to her credit. At any rate, I know for sure that having communion wine in the first weeks and months, maybe the first year or two of her sobriety, could have really been, destructive. So I get that, and I imagine there are people who have scruples about wine, and so I'm willing to make accommodations for that. But it is interesting where we find ourselves, right? For centuries and centuries, the church administered Holy Communion in bread. And what I don't know, maybe you know, Harrison, but I don't know, maybe you know, Scott, whether that bread was historically leavened or unleavened. I think it might have been unleavened, but I don't know why I think that. I don't have any evidence.
I think East and West did it differently.
Okay.
The East used like a cake-like thing, and that had the yeast in it. That's why it looked like cake. And then in the West, it was the wafers. I think that had been done for centuries.
Yeah, we had the wafer things for a long, long time.
Yeah, that I think is right. That sounds right to me. I believe that. But during the Reformation, the thing I know was that the fraction of the bread was a big deal, the fractio panis. And I don't think, at least in the Reformed churches, certainly we were using wafers. Although it was interesting during COVID, we were outdoors and we had to go to these little packaged things, and that was grape juice and wafers. At least in some cases. I think in other cases the bread was something else. In fact, I remember thinking this bread is better than what we normally have. And the wine that we have in our congregation is also strange. It's mixed with something. I don't know. I honestly don't know what they've done to it.
When we were strategizing for that switch to weekly communion and looking at options about bread, one of the things we did was look at this kind of boxed, prepackaged cubes, and we kind of tried it, and it was like, I would rather eat styrofoam than I mean, absolutely, it was awful. We were like, no, we cannot do that.
Yeah. Well, you don't want people focusing on the elements themselves. You don't want people thinking about the nature, exactly of the elements.
This was so bad it would have been distracting.
Sure.
Yeah.
So why not potato chips? Why not cookies? Why not?
They're not bread.
Those?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is they're not bread. They bear no relation to bread.
Agreed. That is the easy answer. So. But if you're going to say, why not have some gluten-free bread? Well, there's no wheat in that. It's kind of like wheat is what makes bread usually, generally. So if you replace wheat with ground up corn flour, are you changing it from being bread to being something else? I think that's where the difficulty comes, which I think that's what Johnny's asking about.
Yeah.
Potato flour, whatever.
Yeah, that's a fair question. Is gluten of the essence of bread? I don't know.
Wheat.
Wheat. It's wheat of the essence of bread.
I don't think so, because, I mean, gluten is what gives bread structure.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And you can bake a loaf of bread without properly formed gluten.
Yeah.
And you've used wheat flour, but gluten-free bread is just using a different kind of flour to make bread. So in that respect, I think, at least in some respects, that is true. Coconut flour or almond flour or something like that. And it seems like we still count that as bread in some respects.
No,
Seriously.
that's a good question.
But that's
why
made
he's
of
asking.
corn meal, not corn flour.
Well, it's a good thing we have a culinary expert here to set
I'm
us
fighting
straight.
the impulse to go grab Mrs. Clark, who actually makes bread and actually knows something about this. She could probably sort us out, because I have never baked bread. And
Sarah's on the sourdough train.
what does that mean?
It's a good train. That stuff is good.
So we always have home baked bread, or well, most of the time now we have home baked bread.
So how would you wrap up this question?
Well, we've sort of driven ourselves right into a cul-de-sac. It seems like, it is a challenge. I wouldn't judge any congregation for making accommodations. I know I've had conversations with people who are, very strict about it, that you have to have gluten bread, which if what Harrison is saying is right, I have no reason to doubt him, then that doesn't seem to be of the essence. And you have to have wine in communion. You have to have unleavened bread. And if you're not doing that, then you're not administering communion correctly. And I've never found that line of argumentation completely persuasive. So I guess that's where I come out on that.
I'm with you on that. And although I am one for details, in matters of worship, it is hard for me to see that the particular ingredients of a loaf of bread were in the prescriptions that we have in Scripture. Could be wrong. Happy to be persuaded otherwise. That's just where I am now. And I have tended to rest myself in 1 Corinthians 10:16 on both matters. The cup that we bless, is that not a participation in the blood of Christ? So the cup that contains this wine-like stuff, wine apparent stuff, that's actually where I land the one cup, lots of cups issue too. It's the cup that we bless, and we've blessed all of these cups together coming from a single source. And then the bread, is it bread?
Also, Jesus says, divide it among yourselves. I mean, that's helpful too when he says that, divide it.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, everyone take one sip of this one cup. He says, divide it.
Yeah.
So
I have a longer answer from 1 Corinthians 11 too, but this is not the moment to
write a book on it.
Maybe so.
I don't think you've written a book on that yet, have you?
Not on that.
Oh yeah, you are writing a book on that.
The weekly communion book should be out in 2026.
You're kidding. Okay. I'm laughing with you. I thought he was poking fun at you that you should write a book, and I didn't remember that you had. So very good.
Yeah, there we are.
That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. I do worry sometimes. I wake up in the middle of the night and I think, has Harrison written another book? I think I should read it. I'm starting to have Harrison book anxiety.
That shouldn't trouble you in the middle of the night. There are far greater things to be troubled about.
Well, yeah. Lately, that's probably not what I'm thinking, but that common cup, that we didn't get to that either. I mean, I guess there are other issues. I'm of a mixed opinion about common cup. That was, I think, the traditional Reformed way of administering communion, and Heidelberg speaks to that. I think we touched on this in an earlier episode, but when we did Common Cup in the UK, it was the case almost without fail that the person in front of me had an obvious illness, and that always made me nervous. The first time I ever administered the Common Cup was in Kansas City. That was their practice when I got there, was to come forward for communion and to receive the Common Cup, and then so I learned the art of wiping the cup and turning it so that the next person, drank from a different part of the cup.
Yeah, there's only so many times that sucker goes around though before you're back.
Well,
that's why
you have the towel. You use the towel to wipe it off.
Yeah. As the guy in the UK, we did the same in London, at least at first. As the guy who got to drink the cup last, I had my practical reservations.
Yeah. Well, it was so the AIDS crisis broke out it was breaking out right when I got to Kansas City, and so in view of that, the elders decided to go to what is historically the Methodist method of administering communion, that is, distributing it individually to people in their pews. So, which is what most people do most of the time. Although in Oceanside, we cut the baby in half. We had people come forward, but we had individual cups. And I thought that was a pretty good solution. And it's a pretty efficient way, just from a purely practical point of view, of administering communion, to have people come forward, if you can. And it also, we had to do it because there were families when we first began who would take elements and feed them to their children. And we thought, well, we're going to put a stop to that. So we're going to make people...
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's my defense. Listen.
Yes?
My defense comes from what Jesus says when he says to divide it among yourselves.
Yeah.
Diamorizo, meaning to divide, distribute, to apportion, divide up into parts.
Yeah.
We're simply being obedient to our Lord Jesus. He said, divide it into parts. Here you go. Little cups. There you go. Ocean spray over here, blood over here.
I think this is I'd like to come back to this.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah, I think that this is a good question, and I'd like to tackle this kind of as our main focus at another time.
Okay.
Me too. And is Johnny an elder? Because I think that's a big part of it too, right? If he's an elder, this is an even bigger question, because if he's not an elder, we could say, let your elders decide. But if he is an elder, you can imagine the discussion, right? Kind of like the one we're having right now.
He doesn't say. So I can't answer that question.
The Heidelcast.
This is Heidelcast News. After years of planning and months of programming, it's here. The Heidel Shop. You've told people about the Heidelcast and Heidelblog. You've even shared posts and podcasts. Now you can show them. That's right. Hats, t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, stickers, shopping bags, and even onesies. If you're into that sort of thing. It's all right here at heidelblog.net/shop. heidelblog.net/SHOP. It's the Heidel Shop. It's here, and you know you want to see it. You can't help it, can you? It's almost a compulsion. It's okay. We won't stop you. Call or text now. 760-618-1563.
That's pretty exciting stuff there, boys. The Heidel Shop is available. So heidelblog.net/SHOP. And
I'm wearing my Heidel onesie right now, if you're into it.
I am into that sort of thing.
yeah, but not for yourself.
Shoot, well, that's a disappointment.
Okay. Well, who knows what you've got under that sweatshirt? So all right, let's okay.
You got some letters.
This one is from John, Jon.
Hi, John.
Who says, hello, and he is an elder. I am an elder in the URC, and I'm in a dilemma that requires historical expertise and wisdom.
And they still sent it to us.
Exactly. Some of my congregants are upset that I send my children to public school. They say that my allowing this is breaking my assent to the URC elder requirement to promote God-centered schooling, which is a line from the church order. Can you give me an understanding of what this means historically? And I'm not going to say where he lives, but where he lives, there are no Reformed schools within a 2-hour drive from where we live. And I took my oldest child out of the local Christian school because they were making third graders create a mural of Jesus, which I see as a violation of the second commandment. Because, Clark adds, it is a violation of the second commandment. So that's why you saw it that way. Other Christian school opportunities include an ELCA Lutheran school and a non-denominational Baptist/Pentecostal school. So I misread this the first time. When I saw Lutheran, I was thinking LCMS. But now that he says ELCA, that sort of changes.
Well, if you don't like images, don't send them to the LCMS.
Yeah, well, the LC or the ELCA. I mean, that's a problem. That's true. Yeah, I misread that the first time. I just when I saw Lutheran, I didn't see ELCA. So that changes things too a little bit. Well, boys, this is a challenge, maybe more particularly for me because I'm in the URCs, but maybe you face similar things yourself. But in our church order, it does require that the elders promote, is the language, God-centered schooling. And people just infer from that promote means send your kids to the local Christian school, which it doesn't actually say. That's an inference. And my initial response to John was that whether he sends his child to the local Christian school or does something else is a matter of Christian liberty, that he's answerable to the Lord, and it's between the Lord and his conscience as informed by the Word of God. I told him that you are a free man and that, where we don't confess and where Scripture doesn't speak either explicitly or necessarily implicitly, then that's a matter of Christian liberty. So people are entitled to their opinions and their arguments, but they're not entitled to lord it over your conscience. And then I said, that said, I think public school is typically a really bad option now. And the evidence for that is pretty strong, both pedagogically and socially. And I've tried to make that case, and I sent him some stuff from the Heidel blog. There's a resource page on public education. If you go to heidelblog.net/resources, you can find the resource page on public education. But if you're not paying attention to this stuff, and if you're working and taking care of kids, you may not be paying attention to this stuff. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in public schools all over the country. So just as a practical matter, it's problematic. About one public school staffer or teacher is arrested about every day in the United States for committing sexual assault on a student or some kind of an assault on a student. And that's not hyperbole. That's being documented. There's some news coverage. It is a little surprising that there are not banner headlines, which I think probably speaks to the social and economic influence of the teachers' unions or something like that. If this were happening anywhere else, there'd be, pretty widespread coverage. There was one Fox News story a year or two ago where one of the reporters tracked this sort of thing for about a quarter and said basically every day somebody was arrested, a staffer or a teacher, for committing some sort of serious assault on a student.
Yeah, what if the Department of Education was paid by the same people who are paying reporters to not talk about problems in the Department of Education? Can you imagine that?
One wonders about some of these things now that we're seeing all this news coverage about who's paying whom to write what kinds of stories and all of that.
I trust them implicitly.
Well, it's a problem. And then there are the fundamental sort of pedagogical problems that have existed in American education, in principle, from the very beginning. Going back to Horace Mann, in the 19th century, public school was created to essentially make good Americans out of immigrants. So it wasn't exactly, those schools were not designed for education. They were designed for socialization. And not to say those two things are complete opposites, but they are somewhat different. And then since John Dewey, the whole educational enterprise has shifted as people have more and more embraced his ideas from, again, education as we've historically understood it, to experience. And so by the time I got to school in the 60s and 70s, they had really started to give up on education in a pretty serious way. And there were remnants of education left when I got to school. But, I'm the product of, 16 years of public education. And here I am still daily trying to overcome my education and repair it and fix it. So it's pretty deficient in most cases pedagogically. So there are those issues. But so I've had my say. What do you boys have to say? Scott?
Yeah, to the question or to education in general?
Well, let's start with the question, then we can take a wider view.
The first thing that came to my mind when I heard the question was, where are the congregation members who are upset with this elder taking their children? And if they're taking their children to an Elka priestess, that's problematic. If they're taking their children to a school where the children are being told that they need to violate God's law, that's problematic. If they take their children to Baptist-costals, that's problematic. So that would be my first question, just a basic practical question. Where are they taking their kids, and where do they expect him to take their kids? And the second related to it is just based off of what you said. They may be misreading those vows or the assent document, that it doesn't really say what you think it says. And then third, this is a huge question about education today. I mean, public school education is, I think the three of us are all, right? We all made it through public school?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay, so the three of us are a prime example of why you don't want your kids to go to public school. So there's a much bigger question here, and I think we can tackle that. That could take several shows to tackle, right? But that's, I think those are the three things that come to mind.
Well, I think you raise a good point. None of these choices are ideal. So there are compromises being made at every turn here.
Exactly.
Right. If it's the local evangelical school, as you say, Baptist-costal, because there's no Reformed school, capital R Reformed school, within 2 hours. And as you say, there's the Elka Lutheran, ELCA, which is the mainline Lutheran, and you really couldn't expect the mainline Lutherans to be particularly faithful. If it were a Missouri Synod school, there would still be issues like the Second Commandment, as we number it. But
they don't have a second commandment.
They number, Scott's being funny, but they number the commandments differently. But they also don't think that there's any issue with visible representations of God the Son incarnate. They think God the Son became incarnate so that you can make images. And we say, no, he didn't become incarnate so that you can make images. He's still God the Son. So there are no particularly good options here. One thing that comes to mind, and what we did with our kids, is we homeschooled. And not everybody can do that, and not everybody is necessarily able to do that.
Nor should.
That's probably right. There are probably some people who just shouldn't, for a variety of reasons, homeschool. But I think a lot of parents are more able to homeschool than they think, and especially when you think about the public schools, as an alternative. Maybe the local Christian school is a much superior alternative. But one of my concerns about your typical local Christian school is that it's really just a baptized version of the local public school. The pedagogy isn't fundamentally different. The approach to education isn't fundamentally different. They're both factories. You work in this station for a while, the bell rings, and then you move to another station. And a lot of it is about personnel management, crowd control, as Kathy Ball once said, and it's not really about education. So
I agree with you guys about all those things. I don't have anything to add in terms of comment on the particulars that you guys have addressed, but maybe the extra thing that can bring to the table is we have to remember that the education of our children is fundamentally our responsibility, and we have. Often rightly, we make the decision to delegate aspects of that education to someone else. And so my point is not you have to know everything about arithmetic, reading, writing, arithmetic, right, to pass that on to your kids. But you are not subject to someone else telling you, this is what the strictures are. You are responsible to make sure that your kid has an education, and you could do that yourself by homeschooling, or you can delegate it to someone else, and that is often the very responsible decision. Not always, but often. And then you have to make a decision that God-centered learning being in your hands for your kid, well, you can send them to a Christian school. And there are probably, not always, but probably fewer mitigating factors against that God-centered education that you don't have to correct at home. Or I'm with you about the Christian liberty factor. There may be good reasons, even just quality of education. If you are in a place where agendas in the public school system are not as highly running as they are in other places, it might be a good decision to send your kid to a public school. And you have to know that then it is still your responsibility to filter through that stuff.
And catechize.
And process with your kids about what they're learning and the various other contributing factors that may be shaping things that they've heard. That's the case whether you send them to a Christian school or not. Yeah. Unless it is a reformed school where everybody is down the line with you on everything, you have to do that to some degree.
Yeah, and even reformed schools have been known to do goofy things like have spiritual emphasis week and bring in sort of an evangelical RCA guy and have an altar call where you come forward and nail your sins in the form of a piece of paper to a cross. That sort of stuff. And that stuff actually happens. So you really have to pay attention to wherever your child's being educated. I agree with that entirely. I think if you're going to use the public school as a resource, and there are times when that needs to happen, you need speech therapy or something like that you can only get through the public school, and you're paying for it in your property taxes anyway, or through your rent or whatever, which goes to property taxes. You need to really get to know your local public school. You need to pay attention to the school board. You need to look at the curriculum. You need to sit in on classes so that you can hear the kinds of things that are being said. You shouldn't assume anything. I've had so many people tell me, well, my district is different. And then you look into the district, and I write back and say, well, actually, no, it isn't different, because everybody who works in your district, they all went to the same, kinds of colleges of education in universities. They've all imbibed the same ideological nonsense, and they may be culturally, socially conservative, but that doesn't mean that they're not actually communicating weird and crazy stuff to your child, and that the worldview through which they're filtering everything is not fundamentally alien, or that your good school, right, isn't being run by a school board that's populated by lunatics. And that's what we're seeing increasingly now. The school boards used to be concerned parents and others who made sure that things were being done properly. And now we find school boards actually telling the parents to sit down, shut up, go away, and your children belong to us. And those are in quote unquote good districts. So I always urge extreme caution. Well, anyway, I hope that is some help to John. And I'm sorry, John, that when I first read this, that I didn't see that was an ELCA school. So I wish I'd seen that. But anyway, so...
Don't let them bind your conscience, John.
Well, yeah, I think that's right.
Praying for you.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by Heidelberg Reformation Association.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidel Media production.
The best podcast